Okay, everybody, we have reached the bottom of the hour, so let's get started with today's L10 webinar, 5 ways to use gamification theory to train and motivate your teams virtually, sponsored by the Game Agency. My name is Tim Sosby. I'm editorial director for L10. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to serve as a host of our webinar. I'm going to start there with some housekeeping items for you. We are planning a 30-minute session. You'll notice that your phones are on mute, so any questions or comments you have, please do submit them as they occur to you using the questions window there on the control panel on the right side of your screen. Just type in the question, comment, send them on in, and we will address it as quickly as we can, or take them offline. But it's always good to have you send in comments, questions while they're fresh in your mind as they occur to you. Also on that control panel, I wanted to point out the handouts window. There are several items there you may wish to download, including a copy of today's presentation slides, also some information on the L10 calendar of events, and some information from our sponsors today, the Game Agency, that they'll be telling you about throughout today's webinar. You can download any or all of these. Just highlight the titles. It'll walk you through downloading to your desktop. And if you have trouble with any of that, you can reach out to me at my email address showing here. I'll be happy to connect you with those handouts offline. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand in the L10 Self-Directed Learning Library. I'm going to send you an email about an hour after today's webinar with a link to the recording. It'll be available in that Self-Directed Learning Library a little bit sooner than that, and I'll share an address with you for that library later in today's program. And speaking of sharing, as you leave today's webinar, a follow-up survey will appear on a separate browser window. Please do take a moment, look for that survey, and share your thoughts with us on today's program. And finally, if I can help with anything around your L10 membership or our webinar program, certainly don't hesitate to reach out. I'll share my email address later in today's program as well. Okay, with all of that said, let me introduce you to our speakers. You're going to be hearing today from Jamie McDonald and Carrie Weiser of the Game Agency. Jamie is Executive Vice President of Customer Success at the Game Agency, where she oversees strategy and working with customers to develop game-based solutions to transform employee training and education. Prior to her career in games and technology, Jamie spent 15 years in the music industry. Carrie is a senior instructional designer balancing a creative vision with the practical realities of developing and delivering content to learners. She has 20 plus years of experience, and they span a wide variety of clients in the private sector, federal government, and higher education. I know you're going to enjoy learning from Carrie and Jamie today, so I'm going to turn things over to Jamie to get us started. Well, thank you both for joining us, and Jamie, I'll let you take it away from here.
Great. Thank you so much, Tim. Great to be here today, everybody. Just going to, here we go. I'd love to introduce the Game Agency first before I turn this over to Carrie. So like Tim said, I'm Jamie McDonald with the Game Agency. And to give you guys a little bit of background on who the Game Agency is, we are game developers. So our founders came from Atari and other game publishing companies. So everything we do really takes a game-based approach first when it comes to training and education. We do work with many folks, in the L10 community. So hopefully some of our current customers are on the call today, but we're excited to share a little bit more. So when it comes to custom game development, our team is made up of game designers, software developers, instructional designers, graphic designers. So when it comes to building out any kind of custom solution, that could be anything from a simulation, a game-based training app, a game for patients, a game to teach doctors how to communicate with patients, any number of ideas. In addition to doing custom solutions, we also have a do-it-yourself platform called the Training Arcade, and we have a lot of the L10 customers actually subscribers to our platform currently. The Training Arcade is meant to be a tool that lets you build out your own games with your own content very fast and affordably, and you can deploy those games to your learners absolutely anywhere. They're SCORM compliant, so they can be included in your LMS. You can embed a game directly as a web object into a course. You can email links out. You can use them on your Zoom calls or Teams calls. So there's a lot of flexibility with the games. And within the platform, there is a library of 10 different game types. One of them is the official Jeopardy game, which some of you may have seen before, that we built in partnership with Sony and Jeopardy Productions. And coming soon, we're really excited. Next month, we are launching the official Wheel of Fortune game, which is another license that we have from Sony. So that will be the official Wheel of Fortune game for training. In addition to our games, we also have relatively new, about the last 6 to 9 months, we added a gamification layer to our platform called Arcades. And this is the new layer that is available in order to drive that extra motivation. Get your learners coming back to spend more time with your content and get rewarded for doing so. So we're going to talk quickly about why games before I turn this over to Carrie. The best thing about games is that they can act as a really nice complement to what you're already doing in the training space. In many regards, they're used as a follow-up to the learning, as a really nice way to assess what people know. But in some instances, you can also use the games as the actual learning component. And because they're fun, there's that level of frequency. People tend to want to come back and improve their score. There's leaderboards attached to it. And, when you're talking about somebody who may not be very proud of the score that they get at the end of the game, the ability to hit that play again button and really to spend more time with your content has proven that there's a nice impact in the learning. Games also add really nicely to virtual meetings and live events. So, in the world we're all living in today, with the need, even greater than ever before, to be able to connect your remote learners, games are a great way to add into your Zoom calls or Microsoft Teams calls, WebEx, whatever you guys might use. One of my favorite features about games is all the great data that they collect. So it's not just about using a game or a quiz at the end of a learning, a 1 or 2, 3 question quiz to know that the person checked the box saying, yes, I did this. Games collect a lot of data about what's going on, with the learners. So it could be, which games did they play? How many times did they play it? Did you see an improvement in their score from maybe the first time to the second and third time they play? And specifically, which questions did people get right and wrong? Or maybe even when an entire group plays a game, the data will really show where the gaps might be in the learning to help you go back and cover up on that information. Games are also really flexible in terms of where people can play them. The goal is to meet people where they are, which is usually on their mobile device or an iPad or something like that. So games can be played, not only inside your LMS, but on any device that your learners might be on. And our goal is to make sure that your trainers become heroes by using these games. And the last point is just the 3 C's we always say. Keep your employees connected, collaborating, and competing. And, today more than ever, that is so important. So I'm going to turn this over to Carrie now, who's going to really share gamification from the perspective of an instructional designer. So take it away, Carrie.
Thanks, Jamie. So here's our agenda. I'm going to start with some basic theory, and then I'll look at how games and gamification can help you improve the virtual learning experience. And these are the 5 ways that we'll focus on: building community, nudging, creating mixed media learning journeys, rewarding your team, and measuring engagement. So to start with a definition, when I talk about games, I'm referring to the actual learning experience, or sometimes I like to refer to it as the instructional strategy that you're using to support a performance outcome. So as you can see here, games are fun because they put people in the center of the action, and they provide context and relevance, emotional connection, engagement. So basically, instead of passively reading or watching something, games challenge you to use your knowledge and skills to overcome obstacles and to try again when you fail. So basically, by doing this, games flip the training sequence. So they ask players to use their higher order thinking skills. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by flipping the training sequence? It's basically leading with the experience instead of the content. So I think we're all familiar with the experience where you have to put a bunch of content out for people to read. But what games do is it kind of lets you flip that around and think about how you want to challenge them and how you want them to access that information to solve a problem, not just what you want them to remember and what you want them to know. Games also ask players to apply strategic thinking. So again, instead of just receiving the information, they're using it to try out new techniques, to try to solve problems in a few different ways, to adapt to new challenges. And all of those things can help them succeed in the game. The other thing that I like about games is that I'm always trying to make training relevant, and sometimes that can be difficult outside of the context, but games let you artificially create context or artificially create a moment of need. So instead of telling them, you need to go ahead, you need to read this training because later on we're going to test you on it or you're going to use it at your job, you can actually create an immediate challenge and then refer them to resources to help them solve that challenge. And they need to investigate those resources in order to be successful. So again, it's just giving them an excuse to look at things and interpret things as opposed to just reading what you put in front of them. The other great thing about games is that you emotionally engage people. So whether they're winning, whether they're failing, people are curious about what's going to happen next. And it gets them to kind of move along the path because they want to see where things are going. They might want to try again to improve their score. But in general, it just emotionally engages them on a level that a typical e-learning does not. And this is important because when learners are emotionally and mentally engaged, they're more likely to absorb knowledge and retain what they've learned. So the second definition I want to go over is gamification. And you might have already added games to a course or used them as an assessment, but gamification is a wrapper around a learning experience. It's adding things like points or badges or challenges or prizes, or even setting up more of a gamified environment for the learning, thinking about making the learning experience itself more game-like. Gamification can add another layer of motivation, especially for certain types of learners. And I think predominantly, I think about people like salespeople who kind of thrive in a spirit of competition or in a social environment, and gamification can really help get those learners engaged. So speaking of motivation, as you may already know, there are two types, extrinsic and intrinsic. And gamification is just a great way to hook in some of those extrinsically motivated learners. Anybody who gets really excited about rewards or prizes, who might want to play again to raise their standing on a leaderboard, or who just loves the excitement of the gameplay itself. So with those behind us, going to, whoops. We're going to look into some specific ways that games can help you reach your learners in a virtual environment. So I think everybody kind of knows this is how we're feeling. We're got pandemic fatigue, we're feeling stressed, we're overwhelmed, we're exhausted. We might see each other on Zoom, but we're not seeing each other in person outside of our own pod. And when people are already feeling like this in general, it's really hard to get them engaged in training, especially virtual training. So that brings us to our first challenge, which is, according to Upwork, in December 2020, over 40% of the American workforce is still working from home. And how can we keep them engaged and connected? Solution: use games to build a virtual learning community. So a massive multiplayer Jeopardy game like the one you see here is a really fun way to get people in playing in a talking in a less formal way. I'm thinking back to what Jamie had just mentioned about connection, competition, collaboration, just getting them engaged that way, and not just in a meeting, but actually playing together. You can use games during a virtual live session, but you can also use them to kick off a training, or you can use them as a check-in or practice during an otherwise asynchronous training event. And outside of the multiplayer virtual meeting setting, you can still use games to build community. So for example, with solo play, we usually think about that as an individual independent experience. But if you add points and rewards or show the results on a leaderboard, you start to show people how they compare to others. And that can really motivate certain people to play again to improve their score, or just to put a little more effort involved and play more often. You can also set up challenges. So if you have an individual game, you might have a couple people play head to head, just challenge each other and try to beat each other's score. That's another great way to motivate certain types of learners. Another way to engage people virtually with games is through team play. And I think of this activities that we typically do in training, maybe a case study or a group activity, but this is kind of kicking it up a notch. So instead of sending people off in groups and having them come back at the end, you might break one activity into a series of smaller challenges, or set some time limits, award points or prizes. And if you set it so that a person's score affects other teammates, then that push can keep them involved. So challenge number 2, remote employees might be distracted or not stimulated or craving feedback. You can give them a nudge with games or gamification. Games are shorter than a traditional e-learning course, so they're ideal for a quick practice or check-in. You can offer suggestions based on people's recent activity or results of a game and encourage them to encourage more with the content and to achieve better performance. So, for example, you can give them challenges and tell them to go back and replay games to improve their score. You might ask them to play games on a daily or weekly basis or compete with their peers. For feedback, you can track their recent games played or their scores, and then you can give them suggestions to either repeat the training or to play another game based on their activity or their results, or even suggest new games, new training opportunities. And you can also send out regular reminders. This goes back to the spaced learning approach, where you might ask them to repeat games or play new games at different intervals so they are more likely to remember what they've learned. One thing that I really love about games is the fact that they encourage repeat play. I think that this is a huge gap in a lot of the training that I try to develop. Even if I can get them to sit down and go through the training the first time, it's very hard to get them to go through it again. But with games, just by the nature of the way that they're designed, people want to come back. They want to try again. They want to earn a higher score. And it's a fun, engaging environment when they're there. So especially this whole idea of combating the forgetting curve and supporting spaced learning, games are a great way to add that component into your larger training curriculum. Challenge number 3, your team wants to fly through the training and just get it done. How do you encourage focused continuous learning? You can immerse them in a learning journey, and the game of life is one way, one metaphor for this. But learning is a journey, not a moment in time. So you can start with a series of short, highly focused learning activities that include games. And what this does, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the idea of micro-learning and setting things up that way, but you're starting to engage people in the training content one step at a time in between distractions when they're ready to pay attention. So this reduces cognitive overload and helps people remember things better. The other thing that you can do is you might have already used games as an add-on, either as an add-on assessment or as a fun break between activities, but you can also think of games, go a step further and think of an overarching game-like narrative for your content. So you're engaging and motivating your learners from the beginning to the end of the training experience. And that's what I like to think of as flipping the content inside out. I love it when I get an opportunity to design courses this way, because you're leading with the experience and you're focusing on your real performance objectives. You're thinking about what you want people to do, not just what you want to tell them. So a couple of different ways that I think about this narrative is with scenarios as a smaller way of doing that, where you take learners through a story and you let them see the consequences of their choices. And that's a very immersive learning experience. It might just address 1 or 2 performance objectives, but it really gives them, again, that whole idea of relevance and moving them through and seeing how their choices and how their strategic thinking can help them succeed. And if it fails, why does it fail? And how could they improve that next time? The other thing that you can do is you can craft a learning journey, which is a larger curriculum level combination of learning events. So earlier, I mentioned games as instructional strategies for your performance objective, and this learning journeys thing is where it really comes into play. So when you create a learning journey, you're creating a pathway of activities, and they can include games, but they can also include e-learning, interactive PDFs or videos. And when you're thinking about the balance between this, what should I do with e-learning? What should I do with games? You need to think about what content you really need to present versus how much people can learn through an interactive experience, or what kind of information could they call up on demand to solve a challenge. So maybe you set them up with a challenge. Maybe you set them up with a game that links to some resources that help them solve the game or to be more successful at the game. Or if they don't do well at the game, you send them out to an e-learning that helps them review some of the material or information that they missed. And that is overall going to help them remember the information better. They're going to be more engaged instead of just reading a bunch of stuff and then going off and taking a test. When you're building a journey, another thing to think about is if there are any key milestones that you can use to keep people on track. Or sometimes we need to include some gated stops where you need to include or complete certain assignments before you move forward. The other thing to think about is how much of this can be individual and how much of it can be a group. So you might have a learning journey or a learning experience where people start out in their own lane and then periodically come together to work together. And again, this is how you can foster community in a virtual environment. It might just be way too much to have a group experience that goes down several notches, but you can always have an individual experience, come together, share the information that you learned in a group experience, and then go back out and have the individual experience again. So that's another fun way to just get people involved. Challenge number 4, they're just not that into it. You can motivate them with rewards. Motivating with rewards is great for certain types of learners, especially people who are disengaged and are having trouble engaging in other ways. And these are just some ideas for ways that you can motivate them. You could set, again, we talked about milestones earlier, but milestones are goals to achieve. So you can ask them, if you go in and you can play a game daily or weekly or monthly, then you get a reward for that. You might award prizes to individuals or to groups. And you can also create tournament or bracket style competitions with different prize levels. There are lots of different kinds of rewards, and that's great because people are all motivated by different things. I'm always cautious to say that there's a one-size-fits-all answer for everybody, because there isn't. But when you have a variety of different rewards, then people can kind of slide in and do the things that really work for them. Likes or high fives are a really quick way for team members to encourage each other and to celebrate success. Just a really easy way to give somebody a pat on the back during COVID times. It doesn't take a lot of time. It just lets people know that you're there. Achievements and badges for completing a new task or playing a game or breaking a personal record are all great ways to reward for engagement. You can also set up a fun theme. So like my daughter's favorite game right now is Throw Burrito. You could have all of your achievements, which is a board game, but still, you could have all of your achievements kind of focused on Mexican food or something like that. So you can theme your achievements that way. And prizes are a great way to motivate people to go the extra mile. So the last challenge, how do you measure success? And you could do that by looking at the data. Analytics is a really hot topic right now. I don't know about you, but I have so many emails about webinars that are just devoted to analytics. And I think it's great because for so long I've been designing training, and once it's developed, it's gone. It goes into the black hole, and it's very hard for me to get any kind of feedback on whether or not the training I developed was even useful or relevant. So when you look at games, what's really great is that you have all these different analytics that can help you schedule events. You can explore the deeper reasons why people are or are not engaging with your games. You can look a little deeper to find out what questions or challenges are working well, so that you can then decide if you need to redesign those questions or add new training. This is because games are quick to play and quick to show trends. So I think about this when I develop a 30-minute e-learning course. It takes a really long time to develop, deploy, and then if I'm lucky, evaluate it. But when you have a 5-minute training game, it's super quick to build, it's quick to play, and so you quickly start to see results, and you can start to figure out what your audience likes instead of just guessing. And one idea to think about is you can create different game styles with the same content and let your learners pick which game style they like best. So for example, you could have a Jeopardy game and a Wheel of Fortune game that both basically cover the same content. And then you can go into the analytics and see which games do they like playing the most, which games are most difficult to win. So you look at the scores and you just kind of figure out who's engaging with what, and which games are most successful, which games show improved accuracy over time. That will show you whether or not they're learning. And what are the most common errors or largest gaps? Because then at that point, you can start to decide if it's a game problem or if it's an instructional design problem. And once you know what everyone likes, you can tailor your approach to improve the game and then up the engagement even more. So I'm going to throw it back to Jamie.
Thank you so much, Carrie. That was really awesome. So just in kind of summary, I love this slide talking about, all that gamification really can bring to the table and how that affects your brain. And then, of course, what the results are going to be out of all of that, in terms of the person having a much more memorable experience. They're fun, they're engaged, they're competing, and it has that nice dopamine release. So the last slide I want to really talk to you about is arcades. This is kind of summing up everything that Carrie just walked you through. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, this is all great, but how can I do something like that? So we want to let you know that you certainly can gamify any experience that you create, but if you want a little bit of help, the Training Arcade platform with our Arcades gamification feature set is something that could help. So what you're looking at here is kind of a dashboard of what a learner could see if you set up an arcade with a variety of different activities for them to do. And the goal is that this portal is meant to have your learners come back frequently to spend more time with your content. And they're going to get rewarded for everything they do. So that's solo gameplay, that's head-to-head challenges where they can pick somebody to go head-to-head with and see who beats each other, team game competitions, and then, of course, all the learning journeys that you can set up with a variety of your content in a pathway that, would be gated so that they keep coming back until they've completed, or a mission, which is similar to a journey, but it's more of like a one-stop. In addition to the experience points that they're earning for doing all of these tactics, they're also going to be earning badges. They're going to be earning leaderboard status. Leaderboards tie together for leaderboard dominance. And if you wanted to turn on a prizing feature, you can. And then the best part is that the administrator in the back end can go in and really see, who's playing, how well are they doing? Like Carrie was just saying, which games are getting played more than others, which games are people having the most difficulty with, who's spending more time and earning more prizes, and really, making sure that content sticks. So if anybody has interest in, learning about solutions where we can help you out, we'd love to be your right-hand man and provide those to you. So this is Carrie's and my contact information. Please feel free to reach out. We do offer a demo of the platform and a free trial too. So if anyone wants to get your hands dirty and actually create some fun games using our tool and see how, fast and easy you can do it, we'd be happy to do that. So I know we only have a few minutes left. I want to thank Carrie and Tim and everybody who joined today, and want to open up the floor for any questions. Jen, do we have any questions?
Jamie, there's a couple. The first one is, can you explain a little bit about how companies are using arcades, some examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So, because Arcades allows you to put any kind of learning content in it, from games to your courses, PDFs, videos. It's a really great way to use to either complement a current campaign that you have running, or even an event. We have some customers that use this as part of an event. So you could create an arcade filled with content that maybe could be pre-work leading up to an event, where they could spend time and really get prepared for what's going to happen at the actual event. And then during the event, you could put some games in there too. And those games could be meant for competition. They could be meant for a follow-up to some of the, maybe virtual lectures that are happening during the event. And then post-event, you can even add some additional games, and those games could be available for pull-through. So if there are, games that are, featuring content that you taught them during your training session, the games can act as that, assessment piece at the end. So I've seen a lot of people use them at events. I've also seen people use them for new employee onboarding. So if, you have new hires that are coming into your organization, you really just want to get them squared away with understanding kind of the basics before their job begins. An arcade is a really great way to invite people. You can have multiple arcades. You can have an arcade for, let's say the new hires, but you could have a separate arcade for your leadership team maybe, or a separate arcade for your sales team. Or you could even invite everybody to be part of the same arcade experience, and then through user segmentation, you can make sure that only certain people see certain activities. So hopefully that answered somebody's question there, Jen.
Yeah, that's great. So the last one, I think we have only 1 minute, is both of you mentioned playing a multiplayer Jeopardy live on a Zoom call. How does that work?
Yeah, that's great. So ever since COVID hit, we're really happy that we've been able to help people with the biggest need, which is how do we find new ways to make our virtual training, or even just our team calls, more fun and engaging. So because the games that we provide are all web-based, what you can do with our Jeopardy game and our trivia game and soon to be our Wheel of Fortune game is if you use Zoom or Microsoft Teams or WebEx or any of those tools for your virtual meetings, you can designate somebody on your team to be the host of the game, and they would actually use a control panel to control the experience. Then everybody who's dialed in remotely from all around the globe can actually play at the same time live on their own devices and answer questions. And it really just turns that type of virtual experience into a much more interactive, competitive, multiplayer experience. So happy to also demo that for anybody who's interested as well. Thanks, Jen. I think we're out of time.
Yeah, that's it.
Appreciate everybody joining today. And Tim, thank you so much for setting this up. I know that you'll be sending out a copy of the deck to everyone who joined.
Well, Jamie and Carrie, thank you both for your presentations. I appreciate that. Folks, that does bring us toward the end of the hour. If we did have some questions we did not get to, we will try to get answers for you offline as well. So thanks for the great questions throughout today's program as well. Just as we're wrapping up, I'm going to share some information about L10. I wanted to make sure you all visit the L10 website or check out the L10 On The Go app to find more resources available. Our webinar program and on-demand programs where this webinar will be listed shortly, our training partner directory, our e-learning lounge, our certificate programs, and of course our focus on training publications. I also want to tell you about our new Take It Virtual workshop. It's a new workshop on moving your training into the digital space. It's going to be conducted virtually, of course, on these dates, April 27th, May 4th, and May 11th. You can visit the L10 website to find out more information on the new workshop. Also, visit while you're on the L10 website. Please check out our new e-learning lounge module. It's the 15th of our modules in the e-learning lounge. This will focus on creating inclusive learning experiences. And finally, I'm going to invite you all to join us for our next webinar. 1 week from today, we'll be back here talking about enhanced virtual communication to improve multi-generational coaching. You can see other webinars coming up next week and the week after that. You can find even more programs on our webinar page here. Here's the address for a list of webinars, upcoming webinars. Here's the address for our self-directed learning library where the on-demand programs are listed. And I've also included my email address here again. If I can help with anything, don't hesitate to reach out. So let me send some final thank yous. I want to thank our speakers again, Jamie McDonald and Carrie Weiser. I'm going to thank the Game Agency for sponsoring today's program. And I'm going to thank all of you for your time, attention, and participation. Let me wish you a good rest of your day, a good rest of your week, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye-bye, everyone.